Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. This is how to use podcasts to build your English skills. And I'm Sophia.
And I'm James. We're excited to talk about how you can use podcasts like this one to improve your English. Whether you're just starting or already know a bit of English, we'll help you grow step by step.
Let's start by thinking about why podcasts are great for learning English. A podcast is like a radio show you can listen to anytime, anywhere. You can hear how people really speak English, not just from books, but in real life.
Exactly, and listening to podcasts helps you understand different accents, tones, and even how people connect words when they speak. For example, when we say, "How are you?" it often sounds like, "How are you?" Did you catch that?
Yes, and that's called connected speech. Learning about these little changes will help you sound more natural when you speak English.
Another great thing about podcasts is that you can choose topics that interest you. Do you like cooking or maybe sports? When you listen to things you enjoy, it's easier to learn.
That's so true. If you like music, you might listen to podcasts about songs. If you like travel, you can listen to stories about different countries. Learning becomes fun because you're hearing about something you already like.
And you don't have to understand every word. If you miss something, don't worry. The important thing is to keep listening. Over time, your brain will get better at picking up new words and phrases.
Yes, that's a good point. You can pause and go back if you want to hear something again. For example, if you hear the phrase "build your skills," you might not know what it means right away. But if you listen carefully, you'll understand it means to improve or get better at something.
Let's talk about key phrases that are helpful when listening to podcasts. Words like listen, repeat, and practice are really important. These are actions you can take to learn English.
And don't forget understand and learn. When you listen, your goal is to understand more and learn something new each time.
Here's a fun tip. Try repeating sentences you hear in the podcast. For example, if you hear us say, "Podcasts are great for learning English," you can pause and say it yourself.
Yes, that's called shadowing. You speak along with us, copying how we say things. It helps you practice pronunciation and rhythm.
Speaking of rhythm, English has a kind of natural music. Words are stressed in certain ways. For example, in the sentence, "I'm learning English," the word learning is stressed.
Right, when you listen to podcasts, try to notice which words are louder or stronger. That's stress, and it's an important part of English.
And if you hear new words, write them down, make a list. Then, later, you can look up what they mean or try to use them in sentences.
We'll give you one more tip before we move on. Be patient with yourself. Learning English takes time, and podcasts are just one tool to help you.
Absolutely. Don't rush. Just enjoy the process of learning. There's so much you can discover with podcasts, and we're here to help you along the way.
Let's dive deeper into how podcasts can become your best friend in learning English. Now, James and I have talked about listening and repeating, but let's talk about how to really use a podcast to grow your vocabulary and understanding.
That's right. A podcast isn't just something you listen to once. It's a tool you can use again and again. For example, you can focus on small sections of a podcast instead of trying to understand everything all at once.
Exactly. Let's say you listen to just 1 minute of a podcast. You can replay that minute and focus on the words or phrases you don't know. Write them down, like focus on or grow your skills. Then look them up or listen to how they're used in sentences.
And don't forget to pay attention to phrases or expressions that are used often. For instance, we often say things like, "Let's dive deeper," which means to explore or talk about something in more detail. It's a phrase you'll hear a lot in English.
Oh, and here's a fun thing to try. Listen to one podcast episode for a week. Each day, focus on a different part of it. One day, you can focus on new words. Another day, practice the sentences or even how we pronounce certain words.
That's a great idea, and while you're doing that, think about how the words are used. For example, when we say podcasts are a great tool, you can notice that tool doesn't just mean something like a hammer. It can also mean something that helps you.
Good point, James. English has many words with more than one meaning. This is why listening carefully and practicing is so important. When you listen to how words are used in different sentences, it becomes easier to understand them.
Let's also talk about improving your listening skills. A lot of learners say, "I can't understand fast English." Don't worry about that. Podcasts can help you with this problem.
Yes, start with slower podcasts if you need to. Some podcasts, like this one, are made for English learners. We try to speak clearly and use words that are easy to understand. But as you improve, you can challenge yourself with faster or more advanced podcasts.
Another idea is to listen to the same podcast with and without a transcript. A transcript is the text version of what we're saying. Read along while you listen. It helps you match the words you hear with how they look when written.
That's a wonderful tip. And after you listen with the transcript, try listening again without it. This way, you're training your ears to understand the words on their own.
Also, don't feel bad if you only understand a little at first. Your ears are learning to hear the sounds of English. Over time, you'll notice you can catch more and more words.
Let's share an exercise our listeners can do right now. Choose one word or phrase you heard in this podcast and say it out loud. For example, try saying "train your ears."
Yes, try saying it slowly first. Train your ears. Then speed up a little. Train your ears. This helps your mouth and tongue get used to making English sounds.
And don't stop there. Once you practice saying it, use it in a sentence. For example, you could say, "I'm training my ears to understand English better."
That's how you really make a new word or phrase your own, by using it in real sentences. And if you're not sure how to make a sentence, don't worry. You can copy the sentences we say in the podcast.
Here's another exercise for you. After you listen to this podcast, try explaining one thing you learned to a friend or family member. It could be a word, a phrase, or even an idea like shadowing.
That's such a good idea. Teaching someone else helps you remember things better. And if you don't have anyone to talk to, try explaining it to yourself. Speak out loud like you're teaching an imaginary friend.
Oh, I love that. You can even record yourself while you speak. Listening to your own voice helps you notice how you're improving. It also helps you find things to work on, like pronunciation or sentence structure.
One more thing. Don't forget to enjoy the process. Learning a language is like planting a tree. It takes time for the tree to grow, but every little thing you do, like listening to this podcast, is like watering and feeding that tree.
That's a beautiful way to put it, James. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. There are millions of people just like you who are learning English with podcasts.
Absolutely. Podcasts are a powerful way to improve your English skills. The key is to keep listening, practicing, and enjoying the journey.
Let's continue exploring how podcasts can help you improve your English. In this part, we'll talk about listening habits, how to make podcasts a part of your daily routine, and how to use what you learn in real life.
That's right. One of the best things about podcasts is that you can listen to them anytime. Maybe while you're cooking, cleaning, or even going for a walk. But to really improve your English, it helps to create a listening habit.
Exactly, James. Think of it like exercise. If you work out once, it helps a little. But if you exercise every day, you get stronger. Listening to podcasts works the same way. Even if you listen for just 10 or 15 minutes a day, it makes a big difference over time.
Here's an idea. Set a specific time each day for listening to podcasts. Maybe every morning while you have breakfast or at night before you go to bed. Making it part of your routine will help you stick to it.
And don't forget to choose podcasts that match your level and interests. If you're a beginner, pick something simple. like podcasts for English learners. If you're more advanced, try podcasts about topics you enjoy, like technology, history, or storytelling.
Yes, and here's a fun tip. Use podcasts to learn English while doing other things. For example, if you're cooking, listen to a podcast about food. If you're exercising, maybe find a podcast about fitness. It makes learning feel connected to your life.
That's such a great idea. And speaking of connection, let's talk about how to use what you hear in podcasts. Learning isn't just about listening, it's about practicing and applying what you learn.
Exactly. Let's say you learn a new phrase like part of your routine. Don't just listen to it, try using it in your own sentences. For example, you could say, listening to podcasts is part of my daily routine now.
Yes, and you can even try writing down the sentences you hear. For example, if you hear a say, it's important to create a listening habit, write it down in a notebook. Then, try making your own sentence using the same structure, like, it's important to practice every day.
Writing helps you remember things better. Plus, it gives you a chance to see how words and sentences fit together. And once you've written them down, practice saying them out loud.
That's a great way to improve both your writing and speaking skills. Another thing you can do is imagine conversations where you can use these phrases. For example, if you learned the phrase part of your routine, think about how you'd use it if someone asked, "What do you do every day?"
I love that idea. Pretend you're having a conversation, even if it's just with yourself. For example, you could say, I listen to podcasts every morning. It's part of my routine. This kind of practice helps you feel more confident when you talk to real people.
And let's not forget about pronunciation. When you hear a word in a podcast, listen carefully to how it's pronounced. Then, try saying it the same way. For example, if you hear us say daily routine, notice how the words flow together.
Yes, and pay attention to stress and intonation. In English, we stress certain words to give them importance. For example, in the sentence, listening to podcasts is part of my routine, the word routine is stressed because it's the key idea.
Exactly, and intonation is about the rise and fall of your voice. When we say, "How do you use podcasts?" our voice goes up at the end because it's a question. Listening to these patterns will help you sound more natural.
Another thing to remember is that it's okay to make mistakes. If you don't pronounce a word perfectly, or if your sentence isn't exactly right, don't worry. The important thing is to keep practicing.
Yes, mistakes are part of learning, and every time you try, you get a little better. Even if you only understand 50% of what you hear in a podcast, that's still progress.
Absolutely. And over time, that 50% will grow to 60%, then 70%, and so on. The key is to keep going and not give up.
Let's share one more practical tip. Try combining podcasts with other ways of learning. For example, if you're learning about travel, listen to a travel podcast, watch a travel video, and read a travel article. Seeing the same topic in different ways helps you understand it better.
And don't forget to have fun with it. Learning a language doesn't have to feel like homework. If you enjoy the process, you'll learn faster and stay motivated.
Exactly, James. Podcasts are a fun and flexible way to learn English. You can listen anywhere, practice speaking, and even use what you learn in real life. It's all about building your confidence and enjoying the journey.
So true. Learning English is a big adventure, and every podcast you listen to is another step forward. Keep going, and remember, you're doing amazing.
Now let's bring everything together and talk about how podcasts can truly transform your English skills. We've covered listening habits, practicing new words, and using podcasts as part of your routine. But today, let's go even deeper into how to build confidence and make your learning experience more effective.
Yes, one thing many learners struggle with is confidence. You might feel nervous about speaking English or worried about making mistakes. But here's the good news. Podcasts can help you feel more prepared and comfortable using English in real life.
That's right, James. Think about this. Every time you listen to a podcast, you're practicing. You're training your ears to hear the sounds of English, and you're getting used to how sentences are formed. The more you listen, the more natural it becomes.
And don't just stop at listening. Try to speak as much as you can. Remember when we talked about shadowing? That's one of the best ways to improve your speaking skills. When you shadow, you're not just copying words, you're also practicing rhythm, tone, and even how to sound confident.
Exactly, and confidence grows when you practice regularly. Start with short phrases or sentences you hear in the podcast. For example, if we say, "Learning takes time, try saying it yourself." Then add more sentences as you get more comfortable.
Also, don't forget about questions. In English, asking questions is a big part of communication. Practice asking questions you hear in podcasts. For example, you could say, "How can I improve my English?" Or, "What's the best way to learn vocabulary?"
That's such a good point, James. And speaking of vocabulary, let's talk about learning new words more deeply. When you hear a new word in a podcast, don't just write it down. Look it up, learn how to use it in a sentence, and practice saying it out loud.
Here's an example. If you hear the word transform, you could look it up and see that it means to change something completely. Then, you could use it in a sentence like, "Podcasts can transform the way I learn English."
And once you've learned a new word, try to use it in your daily life. If you're talking to a friend or even thinking to yourself, find a way to include that word. The more you use it, the more it becomes a part of your vocabulary.
Let's also talk about listening for understanding. Sometimes, people focus too much on every single word and feel frustrated if they don't understand everything. But that's not necessary. Focus on the main ideas instead.
That's so important. When you listen to a podcast, ask yourself, what are they talking about? What's the main point? Even if you miss some words, you can still understand the overall meaning.
And here's another great tip. Listen to podcasts more than once. The first time, focus on understanding the big picture. The second time, listen for details. By the third or fourth time, you'll notice words and phrases you didn't catch before.
Yes, repetition is key. It's like watching a movie you love. You notice something new every time you watch it. Podcasts work the same way. Each time you listen, you learn something new.
Another way to improve is to connect what you hear to your own experiences. For example, if you hear a podcast about travel, think about a trip you've taken or want to take. This makes the language feel more personal and meaningful.
That's such a good idea, James, and don't be afraid to use your imagination. If you're listening to a story in a podcast, picture it in your mind. Imagine the places, people, and actions being described. This helps you connect with the language in a deeper way.
Let's also talk about patience. Learning English takes time, and it's okay to feel frustrated sometimes. Just remember, every time you listen to a podcast, you're making progress, even if it feels small.
That's so true. And don't forget to celebrate your successes, no matter how small they are. Did you learn a new word today? Great. Did you understand a whole sentence without help? Amazing. These little wins add up over time.
Absolutely. And as you keep listening, practicing, and using what you learn, you'll notice how much your English improves. Podcasts are a powerful tool, and they're here to help you every step of the way.
And remember, learning English is more than just studying words and grammar. It's about connecting with people, exploring new ideas, and opening up opportunities.
Exactly. English is a global language, and by learning it, you're giving yourself the chance to communicate with people all over the world.
Before we go, we want to thank you for joining us today. We hope this podcast has given you useful tips and ideas to help you improve your English.
And if you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Share it with your family and friends and let them join you on this learning journey.
Thank you so much for listening. Keep practicing, stay curious, and most importantly, enjoy the process. You're doing an amazing job.
Bye for now, and we'll see you next time.